Musst du die reinlassen?
Ich hatte
Ja, es ist jetzt doch der dritte Tag, also vielleicht schwächeln die Leute doch ein bisschen ab vor dem Bildschirm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also possible to watch the whole session on YouTube, isn't it? So you don't have to join the Zoom session?
Later, yeah.
Ah, okay. Later on.
Oh, later. I think I followed some of the talks yesterday just by lurking without showing me.
Parallel. Okay, so you can imagine that there's a big audience out there on YouTube.
Yeah, probably, yeah. That's in my head. I'm talking to thousands of people.
Yeah.
Okay. But is Corinne a participant or
A presenter.
just
I think so.
a presenter?
No, Corinne is a participant from
Okay.
Belgium.
Hi.
As I am. So we are two, Corinne. Hello.
Hello.
All right.
Is that
So
French, Corinne? Are you from France?
No, I'm from Belgium.
From Belgium.
Belgium. Okay.
Belgium French speaking.
Okay. Und Frau Scheffelt oder Elke, ich weiß nicht, wir kennen uns von früher, kann es sein? Aus Freiburger Zeiten, vom Wegweiser Bildung, oder kenne ich nur die Kolleginnen?
Wahrscheinlich nur die Kolleginnen. Is it okay we talk German?
Oh,
again?
no, we can speak English. No problem.
Yeah, okay. No, you might know my colleagues because I'm only here from 2019.
Okay, so I had left already, yeah. So, but I still remember the Wegweiser Bildung, of course.
So
Many
what
meetings
have you been doing here?
I've been the head of the academic advising unit at the University of Freiburg.
Okay, so
What Friedrich is doing now.
Friedrich is your...
Yeah, you know Friedrich, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Right. No, we haven't met before.
So it's we meet here today.
Okay. I don't know, should we start or should we wait another minute or? Okay, is it me? I don't know. Yes. Okay, then I just share my screen. Oh, one moment. Okay. Can you see everything? Yes, okay. Okay, my name is Elke Scheffelt. I'm the manager of Wegweiser Bildung in Freiburg. It's in the southwest of Germany, close to the French border and close to the Swiss border. And I'm really happy to present this in such a small but very brilliant audience. So, and I'm presenting our concept of mobile counseling in the city of Freiburg. Just a little for introduction, who we are. We are a guidance and counseling center in the middle of Freiburg and at the Münsterplatz, which is really the city center for educational and vocational questions. For everyone from 0 to 99 or even older, if they want. So everybody can really come to us. Everybody in the city of Freiburg is welcome with questions concerning educational pathways or vocational pathways. Our counseling is neutral and anonymous, which is really important. We're not interested in personal data. If somebody wants to give us the name or the email address, it's okay, but we don't have to take it. And neutral means our counseling is open. We are not counseling into one educational institution, but we look what the concrete or the precise questions are, what the issues are, and then we look at the pathways or the possibilities. You can come to us without the need to make an appointment, just step by. We're there almost every day of the week, and we counsel personally per telephone, mail, chat, and video chat. And now this is a specialty of or something really important for our work. We do a lot of events on frequent questions, something like study without a high school diploma, or finance your studies and training, or school is over, for different groups of people. And we do that not alone as our team, but with our counseling partners throughout the city. So the university has a big counseling department, the labor market agency, social counseling centers, etc. It depends on the question we have. And the events are like public for everybody who is interested, and they can step by and have all the partners who are relevant for this question in the public library where we sit, where we are. So what are the questions people are coming to us? We are the generalists in the city. So we have a broad perspective from early childhood over primary, secondary school to even to retirement. Typical questions are, I'm looking for a special kindergarten like Montessori, pedagogic, or Waldorf, or something like that. Or my son has a dyslexia, dyscalculia, who can help? Or then in vocational training, how can I finance my advanced training? And in retirement, often the question is, I'd like to work voluntarily. So what are my options? What are my possibilities? The first thing we do, if we don't have the answer like on the hand, we think about whether there is a specialized counseling department in the city, which is really for this question specific. So, and then we tell the people who that is and how they can reach it. Who is coming to us? I said we are in the middle of the city, really in the city center. And I said we don't take personal data, but we do take socio-demographic data, which is really important for us. And we do document the matters, the issues, the people come to us. And we do have a lot of women coming to us, 70% versus 30% men. And this is really typical for counseling situations, not only educational counseling, but or vocational counseling, but all the counseling centers tell rates like this. And we still work on it to make it more even. Then we have a lot of migrants coming to us, 50%. The rate, the average rate of migrants in Freiburg is around 25–30%. So it's a lot more than the average coming to us in the city center. And then I have this graph of the high school certificate of our counselees. And you see there are quite a lot of people with academic certificates or certificates of vocational training. So this is quite a few or a big percentage. And we do have people without certificates, and the lower certificates like CSE or GCSE. but still there is quite a high percentage of the academic certificate. And the not asked are not because we don't ask the people who are there, but these are our cooperation partners, because we do a lot counseling of our cooperation partners. So we don't ask them for their educational background. But we do have a lot of structural barriers. You see that in the first graph. You see low educated people don't really come to guiding centers. And in Germany, especially, I don't know how it is in Belgium, but in Germany, this is a really big problem. The level of the education of the parents is really, it depends what children later in life can do or do. So there is a study of the Deutsche Kinder- und Jugendstiftung from last year, and they have this really, I think, really good graph which visualizes the problem. So you have 100 children of non-academic parents and 100 children of academic parents starting in primary school together, and then you see the first step, which is really already a late step because there are quite a few steps in between. But so this is the first step. They show the university starters, and you already see from the children of non-academic parents, only 20 go to university, and from the children of academic parents, 74 start with university. And then you see how this lowers through the different steps, like bachelor graduates, 63 with academic parents, 15 only with non-academic parents. So this is really a big barrier. And for us as a guidance center or counselors, it is the problem that a lot of people do have less access to relevant information and helpful networks. We see that in the counseling process all the time. Often there are limited social structures, language abilities are limited also, and the lack of relevant infrastructure in the urban districts. Sometimes people don't have time, the lack of time, like they have shift work or working long hours, plus care duties and dequalifying working places. So in effect, the selection of the counseling place and the institutional setting has a lot of effect on the openness or closeness of the whole setting. We always think we have an open access because we don't have, as I said, we don't have to make an appointment. We're in the middle of the city center, but still a lot of people don't come to our guidance center or even don't know that something like that exists. So what is the resume? We said we need a mobile counseling offer. And we started already 2015 with a mobile counseling offer in different urban districts. 4 districts in Freiburg, and now into this year we started with another one. So we have 5 urban districts. And how did we select these districts? We looked at the poverty rate, the recipients of social welfare, the rate of unemployed persons, the percentage of low educated persons, and the percentage of migrants, always in relation to the average rate of the whole city. And so we selected 5 districts where we go to different institutions like kindergartens, schools, public places, family centers, or neighborhood centers. And we selected these places in close cooperation with the local institutions, because they really do know where people are and where people gather. And if we see that a place is not of so much interest anymore, we change the places too. So we are there in different times in the kindergartens and schools, in the mornings or the afternoons when parents bring their children into school or kindergarten, or in the neighborhood centers. It's more the midday when the people come to have a cost-free lunch. So it differs from the institutions. We have a multilingual counseling offer. Our team has all these languages, English, French, Russian, Ukrainian, Italian, Arabian, in the offer. Not everybody speaks that, but we can offer. And we do present our offer in German language courses. So we present the offer one date, and then we come back a few weeks later, and people who are interested can have a counseling offer then. And we do a lot of video chats, single video chats, but a lot of group events too. And I heard the collaboration and cooperation concept in this conference a lot already. And it's really the group events in video chats we experience as very, very empowering for the people who would take part. It's really mutual effects. So we leave a little bit the role of the counselee, and the people who take part, the participants, do a little bit counseling and empowering themselves. So it's quite interesting what happens there, but this is another topic. Just for visualization, we had the problem during COVID. We couldn't go into all these institutions. And in early summer, we were allowed to come back, but it differs from institution to institution. So this is a kindergarten where my colleague has her counseling, and they didn't allow her to come into the building. So she said, but I want to come back. People do have questions. And so she's sitting outside in the morning with a little table and is there for 1.5 hours. And the people are really happy that she's there and they're coming for counseling. But now it's almost November in Germany and it's getting cold and dark. So we might have to close this, or maybe we can go into the building. This is another kindergarten in another district. And yeah, she is allowed again into the building. So she sits in the entrance room and is open for questions. And yeah, the people are also happy that she is back. So the figures I showed you now with the urban districts, and we see the migrants rate is a lot more, is a lot higher than in the city center. It's 80% versus 50% in the city center. And the high school certificate of our counselees in the urban districts, you see that we do reach a lot more people with lower education, 28% without school certificates, and well, 9 and 10% with primary school, secondary school certificates. So there's quite a difference. For us, the question is really what makes these persons addressing us. These are the reasons why we have, or what we have to keep in mind for our counseling offer. And this is really, really important for the mobile counseling, because a lot of people do not know that they have a question concerning educational or career pathways. They have to realize that they have a question then maybe they know they have a question, but they don't know that there are possibilities for career or educational development, which is not for sure in every country of the world. And then a third step, they have to know that there are counseling and career centers who they can address. And these are what I said before. These are neutral and very, very important, free of sanctions, which is not the case for every counseling offer. So if this is all done, then they have to be sure that the counselor understands them in language, maybe, but also in their concern, in their issue, in the questions they have, and that they're appreciated and esteemed. All this is not for sure in every counseling offer. So, and then the last points, they have to be able to reach the counseling offer easily in the place or in a digital way. They have to get there easily. And for us, this is the motivation every day. They have to have good experiences and gain helpful insights from the first moment onwards. So they have to get out of the counseling process or situation and have at least one little impulse for their motivation to go onwards. Another aspect which is very important for our mobile counseling offer are our pilots and peers. These are persons who are very active in different jobs or networks or associations. They just say, okay, I know a lot of people in different areas of the city. And their job is to pilot people who may have a question concerning educational or vocational pathways and possibilities to our counseling offer. And they start because some of them, we might have a big group, and some of them think, okay, I'm a counselor now, and that's why we have a basic training course as regards to their role and their function. So their function is to pilot, not to counsel. And they do get an allowance for their expenses and for the piloting. And what is very important for them as a group, they meet twice a year in the piloting group for networking. And we also do always further training with them. And this is an example. In spring, we had a nice marketing campaign, and I call her Haida. Haida was a counselee, and she came to my colleague in the mobile counseling offer. She came 10 years ago from Algeria to Germany, and she lives here with 2 children. She's a single parent, and she works. And she didn't know that she has the possibility to get her school certificate as an adult. So she was really surprised and really motivated to do that. But first of all, she had to do her language course to have the background for the school certificate. But then she moved on and got her CSE and finished it last year during COVID in evening classes, and immediately started an apprenticeship as a childcare worker. And now she's in her apprenticeship and has the next goal in sight. And she said she wants to be a pilot as well for us, and I think that's a nice story, nice example. Yeah, we do a lot of marketing. We're really actively on Instagram and in local press broadcast. We try to be very present and very visible. And my last slide. What are our needs for the mobile counseling or mobile counseling offers or the counseling offer at all? We have to still increase visibility, and we have to be very diverse and open in our offers, close to the needs of the interested people. And this is really important. We have to cooperate with multipliers like parents, like social workers, youth workers, etc., but also with all the institutions which are relevant all over the city. So, and this is important. I said that before. It is important because we have to connect to the institutions that are accepted to put our offer at their institution. And yeah, we hope we're quite successful. Thank you for listening. And if you come to Freiburg, you're very welcome. Just step by. We are happy to welcome you at the Münsterplatz. Thank you. So if there are some questions, I'm happy, or I hope I can answer them.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
First of all, if you allow me, I will just open my camera and close some files and change my microphone because I don't think you hear me well.
Yes, we do hear you.
You do? Okay, don't worry. I will just change maybe in order to be in an easier position to ask my questions. Okay.
I can also start with a question, so you have more time to
yes.
reschedule. This is financed by the federal state, isn't it? Baden-Württemberg.
No, it's financed by Freiburg City.
Freiburg City, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I think Mr. Mocigemba knows. It was a project, a federal project of Germany, and in 2014, Freiburg decided that is so important that the city finances it now.
So they are financing the counselors in their positions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So, Corinne.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions because your organization makes me think about a kind of Cité des Métiers concept. You know the concept Cité des Métiers in France?
Yeah. Yes.
So did you inspire yourself from the Cité des Métiers concept?
No. Well, I know the concept because I worked in another organization before, and we had a cooperation, an Erasmus project with France. But I think Freiburg was not inspired by that. It was, I think the network thought, the network insight is very, how do you say, is in the DNA of Freiburg. It's really important, and that was, I think, that was the background for installation of such a project. Yeah.
Okay.
And because I didn't work here before, but I heard about it. It wasn't easy from the beginning onwards when the Wegweiserbildung was established, because a lot of other counseling centers had like thoughts about concurrence and, well, but now it's really an active and very dense network, and everybody knows, okay, this is really helpful for us to work together. So it's really a good example for cooperation.
Okay, I was just I was saying that it was a kind of inspiration also from Cité des Métiers, because I work in Brussels, in the Cité des Métiers of Brussels, and we work free of charge for everyone, from 0 to 99 years old. We are neutral, anonymous. Also, we work with anonymous, without appointments, and we are also based in the city center. So it's a lot of things that make me close to you and your concept. So
sounds interesting.
yes. So you mentioned that the project has been financed by the federal government.
No, the city of Freiburg.
At the city of Freiburg. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you mentioned structural barriers for the people who come to ask you questions, how did you recognize those barriers? How did you determine them? By asking questions to the people who come? Do they have to fill a questionnaire, or how do you catch
they don't
that?
have. No, they don't have to fill a questionnaire. But it's well, it's the counseling process. You hear a lot about the stories of the people, and you don't have to ask them so much. They tell you their limiting factors, and yeah.
So you catch those details during the counseling process.
Yes.
Okay, and now you mentioned also that you select urban districts, a specific urban district. How do you know, or where do you go to find the statistics about, or it is a more unemployed area, or it is a more poorest area? How do you take that? Where do you take that from?
We have statistics in Freiburg, which is really detailed, so we could work out.
Is it the city of Freiburg who who provides those statistics?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and my other question is in the formats. You mean that you organize video chats?
Yes.
And how do you promote those video chats? Where do you promote them for the people to know that they can join a video chat?
You mean the group events?
Or I don't know. You mentioned
video. Okay. Well, the single video chat. It's just the people tell us they want to have a counseling situation, and then we ask them, do you want to come to us, or do you want to make it per telephone, video, etc. Then they tell us, and then we send them the link. We had an open video chat for 3 months or so during COVID, but it didn't work. The people didn't just call in. We were sitting there waiting, but there was nothing happening. It's too scary to just put on a link and you don't know who is like appearing behind the screen then. So we said, okay, no, the open thing doesn't work, but the people can choose between the different formats. And the group events, we make them visible through press and like posters, flyers, through our multipliers. They're very important, the different institutions, so people find out and come. We have one nice example. We have one group event, event, which is like regularly every year. It's called How to Get into Labor Market or Apprenticeship for Migrants, Women Migrants. And we usually do that around in March, around the Women's Day, and usually as an event in the public library or in another institution. And this year we thought, okay, is it possible to do this as an online event? We just tried, and there were more people, more women participating than in the normal event. So we had quite a really good, I don't know, public relations work, marketing.
Okay. I have still another question. I'm sorry for Peter, who cannot ask his questions. I will let you speak, Peter, I promise. So I'm very interested to know where you go for the mobile counseling. Where do you go? Do you have special rooms allocated? Do you have a special truck that goes through the urban sections? How do you do? Where do you sit? Where are you present?
Yeah, no, we don't have a truck. We thought about this, but it's not feasible. We sit in schools, in kindergartens, in neighborhood centers, in the middle of the entrance, or I don't know, in the middle of the room. And for our counselors, I'm not doing this, my colleagues are there. It's sometimes quite complex to have the counseling there, but still we made the experience, if we go into a separate room, we are not visible anymore. And people don't find us, even if there's a poster and even if they tell it. So it's really important to have this visibility, but still find a place where you can talk in quiet with the participants.
Okay.
But Corinne, you maybe I just write my mail in the chat, and if you have any questions, just ask me.
I'm very interested because
Yes.
I had one more question. I think it was I think it's all for the moment. Yes, no, I didn't understand the story of pilots and peers. Who are the pilots? Who are the peers? I didn't understand.
Okay, the peers are just people who have made a good pathway, a good example, and we use them for our public relation work. So we had this marketing campaign in spring, and we will have it again the end of the year, just telling their stories in posters all over the city, and on social media, and our website, and so on.
Like testimonials.
Yeah, like testimonials. And these are the peers. And I called her Haida. Haida was a peer first. And then she said, oh, I want to be a pilot. And the pilots are the ones who pilot people to our offer. And these are people who are like part of the peer groups as well. So it's easier for them to reach people we don't reach.
So they are not only counselors hired by the city in the department. They are also peers who became pilots.
Yes, and they are not counselors. It's really important that they understand and that everybody else understands it.
Okay. They are more multiplicators to bring the people or get the people aware of the service.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. Good concept.
Okay, but I think I take too much time from Dennis.
Thank you very much. I will just let you speak now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you.
Very nice, Elke, and I will look close to your offer for sure. Thank you.
And please mention your email address in the chat.
Okay. Still getting organized, domesticating the Zoom meeting here. Okay. Thank you very much, Elke. It was great for me to see the location. I've been there so many times, and it's great to be back there just virtually. So thanks a lot. And I love the picture of the counselor. Even we didn't see her, but the chair in front of the kindergarten and the mobility, that's a link to what I'm going to present right now, because my claim is going to be that digitization, if we mediatize our counseling room, that also means finding new rooms and shaping new rooms and being able to, well, play on different stages as a professional. And so I think there's a link to what we just heard. Thank you very much for that. Before I start, I hope, can you see my screen? Okay, so that's fine. And you see the presenter mode or you see the presentation mode? Is that correct? Presentation mode, okay. Before I start, 2 or 3 remarks. First of all, who's talking to you? My name is Dennis Mocigemba. I'm currently professor at the University of Applied Labor Studies in Mannheim, where I mainly teach prospective career counselors for the Federal Employment Agency in Germany. And my focus in teaching and research is digitization, mediatization of professional practices in counseling and systemic career coaching, if you want. My professional background was in Freiburg, so that's the link to Elke's Wegweiser Bildung. I've been the head of the academic advising unit at the university there for some years. And my academic background is in media and communication studies, as you will see right away when you see the theories that I present to you. One more remark on the title. Actually, I switched the title. I actually want to give a rather theoretical or conceptual talk to you about media domestication. That's a concept which I think is very useful to transfer from media studies to career counseling to understand what's happening in career counseling rooms or in counseling rooms in general. But due to the delay of the conference, I had the chance to not only present your theory, but actually to do some empirical research on that. And so I thought it's maybe more interesting for you to get some empirical findings about career counselors in the Federal Employment Agency domesticating video conferences. So how do they work with that, and what are the changes that they were experiencing? And one more last thought. You might be surprised about the picture here. Why this naive drawing? I'm just not a big fan of stock photography and shiny, happy advertising people on slides. So I usually ask my 9-year-old daughter to illustrate my lectures and talks. And I made the experience that she's bringing many of my ideas better to the point than I when I talk about this. And so I hope these pictures help you to understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, let's get started. What do I want to show you? First of all, I'll give you a short introduction to the theory of mediatization or deep mediatization. That's a research tradition in media research for 30, 40 years, and especially the concept of media domestication, which I have been using for understanding what's happening in counseling rooms when digital media enters the room. I'll talk about the methodology of the qualitative study that we've been doing on domestication of video conferences in career counseling. If you, for some reason, don't like the idea of domestication or this metaphor, which I'm going to be talking about in a minute, you just use the term mastering. It works fine. Or adopting. I prefer domestication. I like this metaphor. And I'll show you some of the results, what effects and what challenges are emerging when counselors in the Federal Employment Agency actually domesticate video conferences, which they had to do due to the pandemic. They didn't do that before, so that was actually an innovation, something new in the Employment Agency in June. So here's the first picture. Mediatization or deep mediatization, what is that? Usually it describes media change. And there's an old quote that I brought you from Friedrich Krotz, one of the founding fathers of this tradition. He says that people in our culture and society integrate more and more new media for more and more purposes in their everyday life and their relationships. And this molds all our interaction and everything based on them: social networks, democracy, economy, reasoning, socializing. I think nobody of you will oppose to that. That's what we're experiencing and talking about every day in the media, in private settings, and so on. And the point is that career counseling is also part of this, is also getting mediatized more and more. And this is what I want to look at. And this is what this picture tries to illustrate. On the right-hand side, as practitioners, you probably know this setting. It says Beratung on top. That's German for counseling. And you have a counseling session in a counseling room. There's a counselor and a client, and they have a deep conversation about possibilities, chances, identities, career options, whatever the client brought to the session. Usually the door is closed, and this closed door is important for us as practitioners, and the counseling room is sacred. But if you open the door, then you have this experience, which you probably share with me or with others, is that there is dozens, maybe even hundreds of digital media trying to get into the room, knocking on the door, saying, hey, we want to be part of that. We want to colonialize your professional practice. We want to be domesticated and mastered by you. This picture is misleading in two ways. First of all, if you look in the room, there's no media at all. And that's not the point we are starting at the moment. There are media in the room, and there are also digital media in the room. Every one of us is at least having a computer or having some other devices there. So we're not starting at zero, but if we look outside, that's the second misleading idea about this picture, is what we see out there is not only devices, not only hardware devices or technical infrastructure. What we have there is digital media, and in media studies, we usually differentiate two, we call it articulations of the medium. There's always the textual or informational part, the content of the medium, which is displayed on those screens here, or maybe read out loud by the smart speaker. And then there's the hardware, the second articulation, the material articulation or object articulation, which you see here in terms of hardware, like VR glasses or tablets or smart speakers or whatever. And to understand how media are used in any social domain, or in our case, in the counseling room, you always have to look at both of these articulations, not only the informational one. Okay, so that's some basic assumptions of the mediatization tradition. I said mediatization is media change. So what is actually changing? First of all, what is driving the change? This is the box on the right-hand side. It is important. That's one of the basic assumptions of mediatization. We are not passive victims of technological innovation. It's not that Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg and co, they are sitting in their room and having ideas of how they can make us obey to their digital innovations. We still have freedoms of what we adopt and how we use this. But of course, we're not totally free of what kinds of media there are. And so it's always an interplay between technological innovation and societal, professional, and individual needs. So that's one of the basic ideas. There is freedom, but there's not total freedom. We're not totally free to choose any media we want. So how is this changing process, this media change usually described? You can describe it as a change from different types of media to others. The first one is primary media. That is media that are tied to the body, like your voice, which I'm using here to talk to you, my gestures, which you don't really see in this little picture that you see of me, and so on. So everything that is bound to my body. And well, back even in the counseling room back some decades ago, we started to complement primary media or even supplement primary media with secondary media. Analog media like books, flyers, typewriters, cameras, illustrations, whatever. Then after a while, there came so-called tertiary media, analog electronic media like television, telephone, and so on. And they supplemented and complemented the media ensembles before. And that's the phase we're in right now, which we call digitization. There are more and more digital media that are standing in front of the door. Actually, it's not so new. That started with computers and the internet. And the internet is not there from, it didn't start last week. So we're talking about digitization for quite a while. But there's some things that have changed in the last years, and I'll get to this in a minute. So what does this mean for counseling rooms or career counseling rooms? First of all, mediatization as a process is not new for us. So we're having been doing this for many, many years. There's a nice publication by Wenzel from 2013 already, who's described this process. One specific about our profession in the counseling room is that primary media are essential for us, for our profession, for our professional identity, different to other professions. I mean, we're specially trained to be present with our body in the room, sitting in front of the clients. We are professionally trained to read nonverbal or paraverbal information and so on. So that's every media change is in some way a threat to our professional identity. What is specific? Well, the counseling room is full of secondary media. If you look around, you certainly have a number of visualization tools, card sorting systems, a whiteboard, I don't know, whatever you have in your counseling room, but certainly dozens of secondary media. So you have already mediatized your practices in the past. One specific, at least that's a claim by me, tertiary media have not had massive impacts on our professional practices, at least not in the counseling room. There have not been so many like videos or cassette tapes or anything that we have been working with in counseling, maybe in schools, in vocational education, but not really in the counseling room. And so maybe it's kind of a shock that now there's the next media boost, the next media change with digital media. And in addition to that, digital media just have some characteristics that make this kind of digitization or deep mediatization, as we call it, a very special task. So what are these characteristics? I'm not going very much in the details. If you want to elaborate that, just read Andreas Hepp, 2020, Deep Mediatization, a very good read that I can recommend. He says, well, there's 5 characteristics. I'm only getting deeply into one. The first ones are different digital media. They are differentiated, they are omnipresent and interconnected. Differentiated means that you don't have one medium, but you have one for every circumstance. You have a smartwatch, you have wearables, you have smart glasses, you have computers, tablets, iPhones, whatever. There are so numerous devices. They are omnipresent. There's almost no place you can go where you don't see them. Maybe church, I'm not sure, I'm not a churchgoer, but maybe that's one of the last regions which is not mediatized so much. And they're interconnected. That means they talk to each other. Sometimes we don't like that. Sometimes we don't even know that, but that's what they do. There have been nice notions that describe exactly these characteristics. The terms media manifold, media menu, media ensembles. I'll get to those media ensembles later. Then digital media are sometimes objects that haven't been regarded as media before, like your car or your fridge in your smart home. They start to join the conversation, collect data, and enter into your everyday behavior. You get a mail that you have to buy milk when you're in the supermarket, for instance. That's what is called datafication, and that is insofar a problem for media studies, that the notion of digital media becomes more and more blurred. But let's get to the 5th and, in my opinion, most important characteristic of digital media. They have hugely increased development cycles. It's not that you buy a television every, like in the 70s or so, you bought a television every 15 years. But those things that we have in front of our counseling doors, they're changing every few weeks, every few months. And they are, as Hepp says, media as process, or forever in better, products in a constant flux, liquid media. And that's important because you buy one of those, not for counseling, but for private purposes, for instance, and you don't know what you're going to be doing with it in 3 months' time, because the operating system has changed. There are new apps, there's no hardware accessory. So the thing itself changes and is not what you have bought some time back. So what does this mean, and how far is this a special task for adopting these media in contrast to maybe old media, analog media, for instance? Career counselors do not only need media education or media training on a certain medium, they need a new media culture or a new media attitude in order to continually keep on domesticating or mastering those media as process and to master this constant flux. It's not about knowing how this online say with a counseling medium, to know what an online self-assessment is actually doing and helping you. You need the ability to constantly re-domesticate those tools that you're using in your practice. Okay, so this is one major difference between digital media and analog media. So how can you now examine those mediatization processes or media change processes empirically? First of all, Hepp and Kotz and others say, you cannot describe this globally. You better do this in social domains, or as they call it, in mediatized worlds. Yeah, the basic mediatized worlds that have been looked at were the private home, the living room, and the workspace. That's what I'm doing when I'm looking at the counseling room and the stage where you work as professionals. But there are other mediatized worlds of interest, especially sports. There's a lot of innovation going on in terms of mediatization in sports. But we're going to be looking at the workplace and the counseling room. Then one important point is, how do you examine mediatization? By looking at the actor's perspective, not by looking at the medium and what is the potential or the functionality of the medium. That doesn't explain you very much. Because we know from 80 years of diffusion research that people don't use tools the way developers thought they would use them, but they reinvent those tools. And to understand what the effect of a medium or of ICT is, you have to look how people use it, not how it is meant to be used or what potential functionalities it has. So media use is always grounded in human practices and should be analyzed as such. There's always people doing things with media, not looking at the medium itself. How should you examine mediatization? Always with a focus on media ensembles. Digital media never come alone. It's not only about understanding how a Zoom platform in our case works, but how is Zoom interacting with my whiteboard in counseling, with my second screen, which I have the information in, all the cables and the headphones that I'm using, the smart speaker. You have to look at the whole ensemble to understand what people are doing, not just look at one digital medium at once. And what else do you need? And now I'm getting closer to the empirical study we've been doing. You need an analytical grid, some heuristic to help you actually to choose what you're looking at if you watch people using media in counseling. And the analytical grid that I'm presenting to you is called media domestication. And here again, I have a picture which illustrates domestication, media domestication. That's what the inventors of this approach said, is all about the taming of the wild and the cultivation of the tame. And you probably know domestication, or you think of plants or animals which have been domesticated some decades back or hundreds of years back. And we're transferring this metaphorically to the world of new media. We're domesticating those wild and strange media in front of the counseling door in our domos, in our professional home, in our counseling room. And so the picture says, well, here's a farm. This is the domos, or where people live and work. And they, in the past, they have domesticated horses or pigs or, oh, that's too early, or chicken. And one main idea is that once they have domesticated those animals, the life on the farm changes. And that's also one basic idea of media domestication. When you start domesticating digital media in the counseling room, you're not doing the same kind of counseling anymore just with digital media, but you have to think or rethink counseling, because counseling is going to change. It's maybe not a disruption, it's not changing dramatically, but there is definitely some kind of transformation going on. Okay, so what are the basic category of this media domestication approach, which we have been using to understand video conferencing? First of all, there is the dimension of imagination. Imagination is the question, how do we as users think this medium, imagine this medium? What metaphor do we have in mind? Which language do we need to or use to refer to this medium? What usefulness do we expect? So what is in our heads when we think about this medium? The second domestication dimension is objectification. How do we appropriate it in space? Where in the counseling room does this thing take place? How visible is it? Where do we put it? And you probably know this from where do I put my screen in a counseling situation so that I am not distracted and that it's not standing between me and the client. Where do I put it best? And that is a question of objectification. Where in the room does this thing take place? Incorporation is how do we appropriate it in terms of time? Where in the counseling session, or when in the counseling session, or when in the counseling process do we actually use this medium? Do we use it before, during, parallel, after? And in how far does it affect the time structure of the counseling session? Does it make anything faster, slower? Is it a disruption? Does it change the phases in which we go through the conversation? So that's the dimension of incorporation. And the fourth dimension is the dimension of conversion, like a transversal dimension, if you want, is the question, in how far do 1, 2, and 3 challenge and change the social practice that we are calling career counseling, that we are doing, or we are calling our professional practice. Okay, so far, I think that's enough theory. We're not having a lecture here, so let's get to the empirical study. What have we been doing? And how far have we used this? By looking at video conferences in the counseling rooms during the pandemic. We did different studies and a reanalysis of these studies. There was one pilot study and 3 bachelor theses that we did on the domestication of video conferences in career counseling. In total, we had 16 qualitative guided interviews with experienced career counselors from the Federal Employment Agency. There were 14 of them, and 2 academic advisors from university, just to check whether there are big differences in other institutions, which there weren't, at least in this time. We conducted those interviews between October 20 and March 2021. That was the first 6 months in which the Federal Employment Agency officially promoted and allowed video conferences as a way to counsel clients. It hadn't been allowed before. There was no video conferencing. All this started with an extra tool that was rolled out in October. It all started in October 20 in our agency. Then we did a content analysis according to Cookards with those 16 interviews, and the research questions were, how do career counselors domesticate? That means looking at those 4 dimensions, which I just showed you. How do they domesticate video conferencing? What effects and challenges do we see? And, which I cannot report to because we only have half an hour, what solution approaches do we see? Where do they look for help? What helps them? Where are they expecting help from? So I cannot report this today, unfortunately. So how do career counselors domesticate video conferences? What effects and challenges did we see? First of all, we looked at those 16 interviews, and what we found, or technically speaking, what we coded deductively, was more than 40 segments in which they talked about the content of counseling. What were they actually talking about with their clients in those video conferences? We had more than 130 segments in imagination. They gave us metaphors or some language, how they talked about video conferences. They made comparisons and so on. We had 120 segments on objectification, on how did they experience the room around them or the virtual room in video conferences. 60 segments on timely aspects of video conferences, and 40 segments on the social setting, which Elke has also talked about earlier. And that is actually not a category deduced from the theory. That is a category that we inductively built from the material that we're looking at, but people mentioned it quite frequently. And these segments were then analyzed for what is called conversions in the theory for effects. So what changed? What is actually different in video conferences than in other counseling situations? And what did not change? What remained the same, reported by the interviewees? And challenges. Challenges means what irritations, problems, or changes are emerging that or are anticipated that are not yet solved, but that maybe are going to be solved in the next few months or years. Okay, so let's get through the results one by one. First of all, the counseling content. On the right-hand side, that's always the, I try to illustrate this on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, you find the main findings. First of all, effects. Well, there were no effects. Most of the interviewees said, we can talk about the same things in video conferences as we do when on telephone or when we have the people here in our counseling room. They come with the same topics, the same questions, the same issues. Maybe we're a little more cautious in the beginning if it's getting very personal, but after all, we talk about the same thing. There is, however, one challenge that we did not elaborate in the interviews. That's what the asterisk says here, because the guidelines didn't focus on that. What is likely to change or probable to change is not the what they talk about, but how they talk about it. One challenge is to transfer the methods or techniques or interventions that you use in your counseling room into the digital realm. Like, for instance, if for decision-making you do a tetralemma in your room and you move people around on different chairs, how do you transfer this into a virtual setting or into a video conference? And this is probably going to be an issue. But, well, our interviews did not focus on that. So on the left-hand side, what is this supposed to be? This is like a piece of art. And in the middle, the core of counseling, if you want, the core of the art we are doing is the content. And the content, the what we are talking about, is not changing, apparently, based on those 16 interviews that we did. Around this, the how we talk about, there seems to be some change. We just cannot say very much about it. And now we're getting to the point and to my main claim, what is really challenged by video conferences or digital media and counseling is the framing of the counseling, the frame. So let's look at the frame with those domestication dimensions. One of them, the first one, is imagination. What was the mental concept of video conferences of the people we talked to? And first, it was interesting to see that most of them made evaluative comparisons. Almost everybody compared video conferencing to telephone interview or telephone counseling and to face-to-face counseling. Face-to-face counseling mostly being the gold standard, telephone being the worst they could do, and video conferencing being somewhere in between. Very often, maybe that's a selective sample we had there, very often close to the gold standard. Yeah. But it was interesting to see they're doing those evaluative comparisons, even though we didn't ask them. Video counseling was very often described as a kind of a format, not as a channel, something you can use and then you switch to the telephone, but very often as a format, like an extra box, and maybe even having extra people doing this kind of counseling in a while. So like something totally differentiated from telephone counseling or from face-to-face counseling. And what I found very interesting was there were very many mentions of symbolic effects of video conferences, meaning like, well, it's so good to see that we are doing something modern. And the clients have the impression that a federal agency, employment agency, has reached the digital age, and we're up to date and we're cool. And this symbolic effects of using video conferences and those maybe impression management in regard to the clients. So that surprised us. What were the challenges here? The question, maybe not a challenge, but a question is, do different professional self-conceptions activate different ways of media domestication? Do people with a different self-concept of their counseling use media differently? Like we had quotes going, well, I'm more the information broker kind of counselor, and I need the database in the right-hand screen as an extra window. But my colleague next door, he's more the therapist kind of counselor, and he's using it differently. So the self-concept seems to have an important effect on how people actually domesticate and use those digital media. And one challenge is how to develop a mental concept of video counseling that is suitable for the counselor and understandable for the client. So many of them of the interviews said it's difficult to explain the clients why we are using video conferences and not the telephone, and why we're going to invite them back into the room now, since we can do that again, and when we stay with a video conference. So to give them an understanding why we're using this tool. So this is why the reason why I put this in the framework here. And I say, well, that's one dimension of the framing that we have to give for ourselves as practitioners, but also for our clients to understand what counseling in the digital age actually is going to be. Okay, so let's move on to the next objectification dimension, and there we're getting the link to what Elke has told us before. One, maybe the most important finding was multiplication of counseling rooms. That it was mentioned by quite a few people. They said something like, I'm not working in one space anymore. I'm working almost everywhere. I'm working in virtual spaces. I'm working in schools. I'm working in home office. Yeah? Nobody said I'm working in front of the kindergarten, like in Elke's case, but well, maybe that's an option too. So there's a multiplication of counseling rooms. Another interesting finding was that there seems to be a new sensitivity for the counseling room. People told us that they are thinking about the background of their video picture. And they told us, well, at home, I took off the pictures. I painted the walls. I asked my employer for a poster I can put up there. They did all kinds of things. And then it was interesting to see that some even said, well, I didn't stop there. I started to tidy up my whole room. I got rid of all those flyers lying around, which I don't use anymore. So there seems to be a new sensitivity coming into the mind of the counselors just by using a new digital tool. One thing was the refocusing of the counselor's view, and it was evaluated positively very often. They said, well, I don't get that good of an impression of the person sitting in front of me. I'm only seeing this small picture, not seeing the feet or the hands. But I get an impression of the background. I see how the people actually live. And that's really interesting. I only get that as a description of what they tell me, what they can control when they talk about it. And it's just very helpful to see how those people actually live. It helps me to build a relationship to those people. So very often, not as you would think, it was actually evaluated positively. It would be interesting to evaluate this with a much larger sample. So what are the challenges here? First of all, how to combine all those multiple spaces that we have and shape an adequate room for clients to open up, and how to act differently as a professional on those different stages that we have and that we can build ourselves with all these different rooms. Another challenge is how to deal with the loss of control in the other part of the room. Just as I'm seeing some of you, like Corinne or Elke, I don't have the control. I don't know if there's anybody else sitting there. I don't know if you have the doors closed. I don't know if I would ask you personal issues, because usually it's my responsibility as a counselor to close the room and to get rid of distraction. And in a virtual setting like this one, we just have to accept that this is not possible. And we have to give this responsibility. We hand this over to the client, and we have to decide, is the client ready to take this? Can we give instructions so that we can build on that? Or is it not the right setting to do certain, or to counsel certain issues in this setting? And then last point here on this slide is how to master the media ensemble. Many people said, well, it's just a hassle with all these electronics here. There are cables and there is new devices and the headset and the camera and so on, and different windows in the virtual setting. And I have to organize all this. And well, they have to master this media ensemble. And well, the point is not to understand how Zoom works, but to how really master all these different media that make up the counseling ensemble. Okay, so that's the objectification dimension. The second big challenge, as I claim, concerning the framework of digital counseling. I think I don't have the time to go into those pictures, but you have the chance to look at those illustrations later on. They just try to illustrate what I try to tell you right away. I will provide those slides for you later on. Okay, so the third dimension is the time aspect. That's a little shorter. What effects or challenges did we see here? Well, the first one is trivial. You all experienced this, and I think we had this even in the last 40 minutes or 50 minutes that we've been here together. There's an extra layer of communication. And as systemic coaches, you always use different levels of communication, not the content level, but also the process level, and you're trained for that. But here's another level, it's the technological level. Can you still hear me? Can you still see me? And this is a disruption in the process, and this interrupts the conversation. You have to take time for that, either in the beginning or during the conversation. And so the structure, the timely structure of your whole counseling process is changed just by using this medium. And one other thing that many of the interviewees mentioned was they have an accelerated focus, as we called it. That means due to the fragility of the connection, they are afraid that they lose the contact to the clients. They get to the point much faster. There's not so much small talk in the beginning, but they get to the point faster. And maybe that's bad for relationship building. But maybe that's one of the challenges, and maybe that's one of the questions that we are asked by using digital media: how and when to build and to invest in relationship with clients in video conferences. Maybe it's not necessary or sensible to do that in the beginning, as we are used to do and trained to do. Maybe it's sensible to think of that as something we do in the process. Maybe later on, maybe in a second meeting when we have more time. Maybe this relationship just develops or evolves over a number of sessions. So that's maybe a challenge that is given to us as we domesticate video conferences in counseling. And another question is, are traditional time structures that we have, like in the Federal Employment Agency, they usually have 45 to 60 minutes for a session. Maybe we have to rethink these time structures and think about the length of a session, the frequency in which we meet. Well, maybe it's shorter sessions, but it's a higher frequency, and we have to explore this. And well, we are challenged as counselors in the framing of our counseling services. Okay, so finish the frame and go to the last framing dimension that I'm showing you. Okay, here's some pictures that try to illustrate what I just told you. I will provide the slides, as I said. It's the social setting. And well, there have been some talks in the last few days about this. The interviewee said, well, there's increasing participation of third persons or third parties in the counseling. There's teachers, parents, peers, carers, helpers, you name it, dogs, cats, and they're participating in the counseling process, and we have new flexibility concerning the social setting. And usually that is positively evaluated by the interviewees, but it also gives us some challenges, like how to realize exclusiveness. In some cases, we just want to get rid of those parents that answer the questions before their children can. As practitioners, you know what I'm talking about. And how can we realize this exclusiveness? Or how can we moderate this talking bunch if everybody starts to talk at the same time because of time delays in the internet connection? So there are some challenges concerning the control of the social settings. Okay, so my main point is here, as you see on the left-hand side, in video conferences, the core of counseling, what we talk about, is not challenged, is the same as our interviewers told. Maybe how we talk about is changing. I cannot say much about it. That's an assumption, which is, well, sensible. But what is really changing is the frame. And it's our main task to build frames that we understand, that we can make understandable to our clients, so they actually know on which stage they are working with us. Okay, so the bottom line: no effect on the level of content, probable effect on the level of methods, techniques, and interventions, numerous effects on the conceptual, mental, spatial, temporal, social framings of counseling. And, well, these are the challenges linked to that: finding adequate mental conceptions for counselors and clients, shaping adequate rooms and out of the multiplicity of rooms. And that, I was so happy to see your picture, Elke, with a mobility and well, doing counseling outside the the traditional stage we're working on as professionals, rethinking the time structures, creating functional social settings, and they might differ from one session to the next. And one claim that is combined with that, counselors will need advanced framing competencies for providing their clients with a good orientation and, as we as systemic counselors say, meta-stability about the service that we call career counseling. I will finish with one quote. I haven't brought you any quotes because of the time, but there's one quote which brings my, my whole talk to the point. There is one thing where I think, or where we have to become better, that is for sure everything concerning the framing of video counseling, is what one interviewee said. Okay, so there are some limitations and further research. The sample was rather small. It's a qualitative study, exploratory. The interview guidelines did not really focus on the content. We would have changed this afterwards, or if we had done the analysis earlier. The interview conduction of the interviews was very early in the domestication stage, in the first 6 months. So it might be interesting to see what has happened there, because domestication processes take time. It's not that they get a training and they know how to do that. From the methods, it would have been interesting to work with media diaries instead of interviews. That means people writing down at the end of the week how they have used certain media or media ensembles, not asking them like months later. And well, what are we going to do? We're going to transfer this media domestication approach to other phenomena. One project we're starting right now is to look at online self-assessments. And I think, what is very valuable in this theoretical approaches is the idea of media ensembles and repertoires, not looking at single media, but looking really at those interconnected ensembles of things, hardware and software that we are using. Okay, here's the literature if you're interested. Thank you very much. Happy to hear your thoughts. Get your questions.
Thank you very much, Dennis. It was really interesting. Oh, Peter, you want to?
I just said thank you first.
Oh, okay. I think I do have a lot of questions afterwards, but it's really what you had the last citation was really good. It needs some conceptual thought, more thoughts about it. I think because you pointed out that the interviewees told that the video chat is a different format, and that was something you were surprised of. In fact, I think it is a different format because it changes so much. But it's not only a different medium. It's not. Well, I don't know. I think it's a different format. I would hear something more about it of you.
Okay, thanks for picking out this this term. I think it's a question of definition. What do you understand? What is a format actually? What I meant when I used the term is that the way they talked about it could be interpreted as, in the long run, it's going to be different people doing the video conferencing, and they need different education than the people doing the face-to-face counseling. And I've heard this in other places as well, like in psychosocial counseling, where they have been working with digital media for quite a while. They're ahead of us in career counseling, and they actually have education that we can get education to be an online counselor, and that's different from being an offline counselor. And I was surprised by that. I don't want to say if it's good or bad, but I'm surprised because my thought would always be, well, that's just a tool you use, something you put in your repertoire, and like a counseling method that you take out of your box of tools that you use when you think it's suitable to be used here. But it's very often thought as something totally different that needs different skills, different education. And maybe I'm always hoping for people who are universal counselors. Well, maybe that's my interpretation, my fault here. But I found this interesting just to hear. And maybe that is also something typical for the Federal Employment Agency, because they're so big and they're very specializing in fields, specialized for certain age groups, specialized for certain kinds of counseling. And so it would be typical to have a certain format, which is distinguished also by the people doing it. And that was my reason to use this term here.
Well, I know that from Austria, they have that too. In Austria, the career counselors, they have online special education for online counselors and a special team that does the career counseling in Austria. But like you said, I think we really, as practitioners, we have to think about changing the process, like you described very precisely, because our experience was that you start like very focused on the first question. Maybe, yeah, they're coming more and more throughout the process, and then only from time to time there's the relationship coming up between you and the counselee. And this is really different to the personal counseling situation. And I think that's a point where you can say, okay, it's a different format, because you have to change the process, the usual process.
Yeah, that is certainly the case. That is what I try to point out, that the process is going to change. And well, maybe it's the right thing to make it a different format and have a special team for exactly this. I don't have the answer for that. I was just surprised to hear this mentioned by quite a few interviews.
And I think, and then I'm quiet, it depends, it really depends who you talk to. Because we had in summer, we had an event with pupils aged, I don't know, 14 to 16. And I mean, they're all on social media and they're really so-called digital natives. But coming to a video chat is something really different than being on TikTok or Instagram. For them, it was really, really, really difficult to put on their camera and to talk normally with us in the counseling situation. I mean, they have problem in the personal situation as well, but it was a lot more. So it's really the video chat is is different to the personal counseling. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with you. Yeah, what you mentioned is that is what we heard from our interviewees too. I would have reported this with a second research question we had. Where are solutions and what are counselors? Where are they hoping for help? And one thing they mentioned quite frequently was that the media literacy, that we assume that they are digital natives and they know everything about the digital media that we don't as older people. But they make the experience that it's not so easy to get in the video conference and to have a good conversation with them. And yeah, they're hoping for media literacy in schools, and that is something they're expecting help from elsewhere. Yeah, that's okay. So, are there other questions, ideas, remarks?
Maybe Corinne, I see Dennis more often, so maybe you want to have a question.
I didn't want to speak too much, Peter, because you do not have the opportunity to ask your questions. But again, I wanted to thank you very much, Dennis, because I was very, very interested in your presentation. I take from that into the counselor's virtual room, we must think about that. And also there is one media for every circumstance. which media for which circumstance. We have to make a glossary of that, because counselors are not aware or do not realize sometimes what the best media is for that moment or that moment. Now, how to deal with the loss of concentration of the other part of the room? We have that sometimes with young adults who attend a video conference or a video information session, and they are in the subway or in the bus or in the park or somewhere else. How can we make the message pass when they are themselves in that situation? And also finding the adequate mental conception for counselors and clients. I give you a mission, Dennis. Please do that for us. Develop the adequate mental conception theory for counselors and clients, because for us it would be very interesting to read the theory and also to be able to practice. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. Yeah, next week, okay? Yeah, just one thought on that. What would be interesting in further research? There are two phenomena that we have in counseling, also in the Federal Employment Agency. One is the no-show phenomenon. That means that people don't come to an appointment in a face-to-face counseling, which is quite dramatic for some target groups. And here the hypothesis could be that it's easier to come to a video counseling, and we'd expect people to take their sessions. On the other hand, we have it's like an empowerment of the client who has the opportunity to just beam out, to just drop off, not only because of the internet connections, but just because he's tired or he just doesn't want to talk to you anymore. And that doesn't happen in the counseling room. Nobody's beaming out like Mr. Spock. They might go out and might be angry and leave the room, but that happens very, very seldom, I guess. But it probably happens quite a few times that people just get lost in this online setting, as in online teaching and online conferences and so on. So it would be interesting to quantify this in the long run. Okay, thank you very much, Corinne. And thank you very much to all the others.
So thanks again to you. Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
for the very nice analysis. We worked with the students together, but I have not seen that, and I think there's a lot of food for thought, and I think we should go on with that.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to talk about this. We have a chance. Okay, so I think it was the last session and the last talk. Is that correct? Vitali, are you still there?
Correct.
So are we finishing the session here?
Bye.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Elke.
Bye-bye.